The Lion Roars. I became familiar with Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer's Leo the Lion as a kid, growing up with MGM musicals, when I rode the streetcar for a nickel and spent 14 cents and the whole afternoon in the darkened, noisy, gummy, and ornate movie theater, lost in the world of Technicolor magic. Later, I found myself being waved through many Hollywood studio gates by friendly, obliging guards. But I'll never forget the first time I arrived at the MGM gate and found that I was expected. We moved from Virginia to California when the NLRB transferred my father to San Francisco. We lived in Palo Alto, where, fortunately, I had been accepted to Stanford, which I was convinced was an accident of geography and religious quotas. I quickly found a home in the theater and drama department, where I was to spend 4 happy and productive years acting, writing, directing, and hoping to someday become employed in the entertainment industry. I married Deborah during an exam week of my junior year, because the rabbi we wanted to perform the ceremony was on his way to Ireland for an extended stay, and we didn't want to wait. During my senior year, Deb became pregnant, and I directed a little theater production of an original play, 2 Squared, written by one of my classmates, Bruce Lowry. Years later, I ran into him at CBS. My best man, Al Gibson, with whom I'm still in touch almost 50 years later, designed the lights, and another classmate, Jill Sherry, did the costumes. Many parents joined the audiences to support the kids they'd already spent small fortunes supporting. Backstage, after performances, cast and crew introduced their parents to each other. My friend Jill introduced me to her father, who had flown up from LA and was about to fly right back. He complimented me on my direction and told me to look him up if I was ever in Los Angeles. And I told him how helpful and talented his daughter was. Jill didn't think to mention that, at the time, her father, Dor Sherry, was then head of MGM Studios. Other celebrity kids with me at Stanford were Warner Leroy, producer-director of Mervin's Son, Joan Benny, Jack's daughter, Richard Zanuck, and Gary Crosby, one of Bing's boys. My parents had moved to LA by then, when my father left the government and returned once more to private practice. Deborah and I drove down to see them when we could get away. She was working to put me through my last year at Stanford before she had a baby. It seemed only natural that I let Mr. Sherry know I was coming and asked to see him. And then I was there, at the MGM gate, and there was a pass for me with my name on it, and the guard checked me off his list and directed me to the Thalberg building where Dor Sherry held court, and the gate opened as if it were pearly. There were 2 outer offices, each larger with a prettier secretary, which took me to Mr. Sherry's inner outer office, where I almost bumped into a startlingly beautiful Elizabeth Taylor, who was just leaving with her current husband, actor Michael Wilding. I managed to pull myself together, or so I thought, when I was finally ushered to see Mr. Sherry. His office seemed the size of a football field, with thick carpets and comfortable seating strategically placed. Mr. Sherry himself, standing at his massive desk at the far end of the room, was counting what appeared from a distance to be, and in fact was, a pile of money. He was cordial and gracious, apologizing for getting right to the point, but he was on his way out of town and he had a plane to catch. He asked what I wanted to do. Act and direct, I said, having prepared for just such a contingency. Pick one, he said, catch me off guard. I had done more acting than directing as a student, and felt more comfortable saying act. He nodded and punched the intercom, and a few moments later, I had an appointment with MGM's drama coach, Lillian Burns, who I soon found out was married to the famous director, George Sidney. How I longed to have that moment in Dor Sherry's office back, when Miss Burns told me, after hearing me read a scene a week or so later, that I might have a chance to become a director someday, but that acting parts would be limited for someone like me, to playing character juveniles, if anything. Of course, I had no idea what she was talking about, but afterward, I realized that I could have immediately started at the studio as a test director, and might have had Dor Sherry and maybe even George Sidney as my mentors. Instead, I elected to return to Stanford and finish college, with Mr. Sherry's promise to try to find something for me when I graduated. My anxious parents agreed with this determination. As a matter of fact, they were pleased. After all, they came from immigrant stock and had me during the Depression. A college degree was very important to them. So I graduated from Stanford and the theater and drama department, where I had labored so hard to do well in classes that would someday prepare me for an entry-level studio job. Maybe as a messenger, or even a clerk if I was lucky enough to find an influential sponsor. And that might lead, in due course, to a directing assignment. The irony was, for the moment, lost on me. I graduated and found a job in San Francisco with a children's theater company. 500 performances of Puss in Boots, and Deborah had our baby, Melissa. But somehow it took a long time to reach Mr. Sherry again. Unfamiliar with the vagaries of the motion picture industry, it never occurred to me that by the time I graduated, he would have been fired as the head of MGM. I moved my small family to LA the following year, and I did manage to get a job as a messenger at Columbia Pictures, not MGM. Lillian Burns was at Columbia by then, and I often delivered trade papers and mail to her. She sort of remembered me from Metro, but she'd apparently lost whatever interest she may have had once in my career. I suspect that at the time she had her hands full marshalling the resources of her own career and dealing with her boss, Harry Cohn. Of course, I knew that she and Doris Sherry had tried to help me, but I was young and green. I didn't get it. By the time I got it, it was too late. So you could say that the spirit of Leo the Lion was willing, but I just wasn't able.